Lawsome by ConsultWebs. Breakthrough insights to build a thriving law firm with your host, Tanner Jones.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Lawsome episode. Today on our show, we're talking with Anthony Johnson, founder of three businesses, Stellium, Johnson Firm, and Attorney Group. Anthony is recognized as one of America's techiest lawyers. I've even heard him referenced as the Elon Musk of legal too, which I think is pretty impressive. His law practice started as a general practice firm, but quickly shifted towards mass torts, medical device litigation, and other severe personal injury cases. After experiencing how people are unfairly injured by large corporations, Anthony's interests expanded well beyond the law profession and reached into business and technology. Before practicing law, he had a career in SEO and web development, focusing on internet startups and finance. But today's discussion, it's on disruption, tech, data, and the future of law. Welcome, Anthony. Glad to have you on the show today.
Glad to be here. It's always a fun topic to talk about.
So for those working in the legal profession, the premise of technological advances and just the fact that those advances are going to continue to change the way law is practiced each and every day, that concept has been around for some time. From artificial intelligence to data-driven tools, new technologies are obviously helping to optimize processes within a law practice. And although we've certainly seen progress, change within the industry up to this point has been relatively minimal. Throughout your career, Anthony, where have you seen some of the greatest resistance to change within the legal profession?
Yeah, it's interesting. COVID was an interesting era. I read a lot of books on topics I usually wouldn't, but I kind of equate resistance to whether or not people are sufficiently motivated for the change. I think a lot of the resistance stems from two places. One, it's an industry that's a professional industry. The standards are so disparate, there's not as much accountability amongst each other. And so you can make a lot of money being okay at things. So there's no necessity as a motivator for change. The other thing is that lawyers, especially trial lawyers, they're going to probably cringe when I say this, we have large egos. And there's kind of this Jungian concept of those with the strongest personalities, or shall I say the weakest? Because they're also the guys that say, the Gordian knot analogy in Greece. It's you're supposed to try to untangle it to figure it out, but you'll never get there. But the strong ones just hack it with a sword. We have to go fight Goliath in court. Our personalities, championship type personalities are the ones, that's the reason you became this gladiator of the courtroom. But in a weird way, you almost have to take that hat off to adopt technology and say, that's not my expertise. I'm not an expert here. I have to have remove the hubris and kind of get the perspective to be willing and open to adopt that change. Even before the money isn't driving it, the necessity is not driving it. And, the only thing that would drive it is, your desire and want and motivation to be part of a change and see what's coming.
Change is always tough for anyone. I think it's just human nature to resist it. But I love that angle, Anthony. I've not quite heard that before, at least looking at it from the standpoint of, find your why, find the driver behind it. And most often, just as you said, maybe there is a larger ego in the legal profession, but there's also probably a larger competitive spirit. And so if you can use that as the driver, that's an interesting angle.
Yeah, the competition is interesting. We're super competitive, and that's our vision and kind of what we've started with this idea of the Stellium is that if you can create a way to measure against each other, you can be competitive, right? Every game has a set of rules and a scoreboard. Well, every attorney does not have a set of rules they play by, and they do not have a scoreboard to compare. So if you have 5 different PI firms or 100 different PI firms, we will be competitive, and you'll just say how great you are, but no one can say, well, what's the score, right?
Yep.
So until we create some standards, until we can fix some of these fragmented technologies, I think then that's when the competitiveness will really accelerate that change in adoption.
Well, keeping this direction, ironically, it's argued that established, well-grounded law firms are more likely to fail since they're ignoring new technologies, new advancements, new efficiencies to run their practice compared to the traditional ways they've ran it for maybe decades. Many believe that the way they've done it for 20 years, for example, will just continue to be the way they serve clients. It's always worked, so it should continue to always work is the mindset. But then we have people like you, Anthony, who are embracing new technology, exploring new technology, investing in research and development to, just to change the mindset often and challenging the status quo. So with your experience and the knowledge you have, obviously you've busted through some of those internal challenges of change in the past. How can law firms prepare for the disruption of some of these new technologies within the industry? What advice would you share?
My best analogy, I was thinking about what a lot of lawyers need to do is go through the 12-step program, right? So the first part is you need to accept the fact that it's broken. You need to kind of believe that there is a better way, kind of have the courage to try, go through that whole step, 12-step, be honest with yourself, patience, humility, all those things kind of go into play here. Mm-hmm. So if you can get through that program first, get ready to do it. I guess that's kind of a first step to prepare yourself to be willing to be uncomfortable, despite the fact that you make a lot of money, despite the fact the world's telling you you're doing it in a way that's good enough, and they're doing it with dollars, mm-hmm. right? So you make enough money and there's no motivation to say, well, if I was broke, obviously I'd be looking for another way to do it. So I challenge kind of the most successful lawyers, I would say will be the hardest ones to accept this kind of thing. I think the other way to really think about this is if you can get over that, how do you actually, what's a real, a pragmatic way to kind of prepare yourself for what's coming? I would say a few things. I look at it from if you go very Six Sigma, very basic, agile, like people, process, technology. I think the big mistake people make is they go straight to a technology and they say, this tech will fix what the problem is. I think that the biggest thing here is to understand how to run a business, not how to run a law firm, right? So lawyers don't go to business school. They basically go to technical writing school and critical thinking school. They don't go to business school. And what happens is you get into a law firm and they are doing a lot of things, but if you ask somebody, show me your process for getting a document, a client from a phone call and an initial interview all the way through the client interview process and working up medical records, on a piece of paper, I always talk about Hewlett-Packard printing instructions, the mm-hmm. printer, and it comes with A, B, C and the pictures on it. Show me your process, right? Well, how do you know what tech you use if you don't know what your process is? Mm. What are you even looking for? So you really have to start with, do you have process? Do you have systems? Have you identified the roles at your company? Because if you don't know that, you're just going to end up with a tool that you overpaid for and you can't use.
Valuable advice. And I think there are probably listeners here who have probably invested in that overpaid tool and it's just still sitting there with
me
half
too,
the staff.
By the way. These are all lessons through failure, right.
Some of the best ways to learn.
Bill Gates say, the only failure is the ones you don't learn from. So
that's it. Anthony, you have obviously a lot of experience, not only in the field of legal, but just in innovation and tech. And you've been able to identify your audience's needs in order to create a more favorable solution. That's been the driver in many instances. It's an incredible skill for any business owner. So for a lawyer who may be stuck in their old ways, if you will, how would you explain that the adoption of some of these new technologies is truly a benefit and it's not going to eliminate let's say the human element or the customer service aspect of running a law firm? How would you push past that mindset?
Yeah, so I hear that asked, and typically it comes from a few places. I wrote a pretty polarizing article about this in 2015 that I actually recently stumbled across. But it's funny because the principles are still the same, even though the time changes. Kind of goes back to core values discussion. But so when it comes to the human element, there's the first way I look at it is that I think some people ask the human element, meaning how are you going to avoid dehumanizing the relationship with your clients, mm-hmm. right? How do you have a better service with your clients when you start automating and using technology that is a layer between you and the direct client experience? My comment there is that when used properly, it really gives attorneys and paralegals the freedom to apply their knowledge and what they do best towards the client and towards the consultation role, towards the interactions, the most important part of the whole client journey, which is helping the client understand, make decisions. When you're over here using technology to like check a box, I kind of like move boxes or copy paste clauses. It's kind of the things I use the most. All those things can be automated, and every time you do that, instead of go talk to your client, that's what's happening now. So I think that from that perspective, that is the opposite of removing the human element. Is actually humanizing law giving again and giving access to justice to a lot more people. And like the whole one call that's all, or I always pick up the phone tagline goes away, because now lawyers, as just a baseline of any business, you answer the phone call and you talk to your clients. You know, I think the second part of this whole thing is that you know, a lot of people think about maybe like the almost like AI driven or machine learning when you start talking about removing the human element within your practice on your internal teams. I go back to the same thing where someone asked me if call centers were going away because of AI, you know, because call centers are very commoditized and all that. And I was like, my answer was, you know why you would say that. What I've seen the trend is that technology now just elevates the ability for the call centers to handle that type of work. The less skilled, less trained subject matter experts, you have the least expertise, they're able to do more, but then it allows people to actually then charge more as the call centers take on work with technology. So you take on complexity with technology that activates your people, that creates more value, and you can charge more for that value. So all that said, human element doesn't go away. It shifts towards adding value to our core customer, to the client. And it doesn't take away from anyone's bottom line either, or from having to fire their paralegal for 40 years. You know, sometimes that's where it stems from, you know.
That's it. And we have to be honest with ourselves and considering, are these lies, you know, that I'm telling myself, or are there, you know, grounds to the concern I have? But just as you said, breaking it down, looking at it from the standpoint of how can we continue to serve our clients either at the same level or even at a higher level with less time or potentially even less money. That's really where the tech is coming in to benefit firms, and having that mindset makes it a little easier to adopt.
I think if you make lawyers realize that it's not a burden and it's not a replacement, it's freedom. Like lawyers complain, all the complaints you hear about amongst lawyers is like, oh, I just don't have time for that. I'm so overwhelmed. Or like every lawyer's been in that moment where it's like somebody messes something up and you're like, grab every banker box in my firm, which I think is hilarious. I haven't owned one in my life. Throw them all out, and we're going to do a review of every single file because someone like missed a statute or like did something very important. So they do that manual review. So like that pain point resonates with people because any big firm has had some type of situation like that. And if you could think about technology as a way to never do that again, like think about what you could have done with that day. You could have literally changed someone's life and taken on one more case. So I think repivoting like the idea, the relationship with technology, shifting it towards the freedom you can have to actually be the lawyer you wanted to be when you aspired to be one in law school. Like, I think that's the change that needs to happen.
I'd like to touch on, you brought up COVID-19 earlier in the pandemic and how obviously that was a disruption for every business out there, including law firms. And we've definitely talked about this topic over and over the last couple of years here, but I'd be curious to know from you, with boots on the ground in the tech industry and you know, obviously being a lawyer, being around the legal profession, what were some of the big noticeable changes that you observed during that time and as we evolved through that time, specifically around technology adoption?
Yeah, it was fascinating. When it first hit and everyone kind of got sent home, there was I was asked in a lot of like podcasts or mastermind groups and stuff like that. You know, obviously like, what do you do? What are some tips, you know, whatnot. Sure. We had just went from we were up to maybe 150 people. We took our entire call center to be fully like VoIP cloud-based, cloud-based system, cloud-based dialers, everything. So like the whole call center said, grab a Surface and AirPods, go home, and we didn't skip a beat, you know? So, not only in law firm the same. And so it was interesting because it made me realize like how much of a problem this was for so many people that I just kind of took for granted, you know, building our tech in a way that allowed you to work from home. So I started from that point. rather than started from a figuring it out point. So where I ended up anchoring on was I'm pretty extreme about, how I go about figuring things out. And I said, like, can we completely run remote first as a law firm? Can we just say, like, office is optional? And by the way, we just leased like a 70 desk office in Little Rock. So not the ideal time to be like, yeah, let's not use that place. But so we started hiring remotely, and what we did, we completely went into, like, how do you communicate? How do you coordinate? How do you like see work, get stuff done, without that whole, locality convenience? What I realized through that was everyone coming to the office, in my opinion, there's a lot of reasons to do it. There's a lot of ways to collaborate. There's a lot of situational things that I think would make sense. But the reason why everyone wants everyone to come in every day is it's just easier. It's like, because the lawyer says, I just need something, and I go grab them and then I go do it. But when you go home and you have to plan for the work and actually distribute it and think about, like, who's getting what, it gives you that opportunity to say, like, here's the moments where we meet every week. Here's the moments where I can pass you work. And guess what? You can actually do work and not get distracted in these other moments, rather than everybody passing by saying, hey, stop what you're doing because I'm a lawyer and you're not. And this is what you got to do right now because it's on my plate. Shift focus, shift back, So we spent an inordinate amount of time on numerous models on how to do this, numerous platforms how to do it. What I think is fascinating now about adoption, though, at a larger scale, is that, and why this is going to be a change that you really can't avoid, is that whenever the court systems bogged down and people couldn't go to court. My best example, I was like, when everyone's sitting there waiting for a court date on some minor infraction, I was like, can you imagine when, like, grandma's sitting in jail for, like, a 4th police ticket, like, randomly shouldn't be in there. She can't get a court date. She's in there for 9 days. Now imagine your politician and his phone getting blown up, right? And so this court situation where, like, what's going on with the slowness and the lack of adoption in the government court systems, it became a political issue. Because think about grandmas in every state like this. And I'm just giving you one example. There's so many times I imagine that people are just losing their shit on what's going on with court. Can't get a court date. Can't get anyone processed. Now that that's gone through and that's taken shape, you've seen the ABS structures in Arizona. You've seen some of these alternative business structures where a non-lawyer can own equity in a law firm, right? It's just a precursor to Wall Street coming in. And another way to say that, it's just a precursor to Google having a law firm and Tesla having a law firm and everyone else enormous having a law firm. So for me, COVID is saying, hey guys, there's a lot of very smart subject matter specific things that we do in legal, self-governing things we do in legal that give us a head start. But if you don't figure out how to run a business, they are going to figure out how to run a business and then just throw the lawyers in as a commodity. And the way I look at it is I'd rather the lawyers figure it out, than the corporations that we're fighting figure it out, because it just does not seem like the right move.
Man, we're seeing that in so many other industries. I think real estate in particular. You're seeing some major corporations stepping in, and some of these real estate brokers and business owners who have had thriving businesses for decades and decades upon decades are now sitting there feeling their neck tightening up a little bit because of this major change. And you're right, legal is right there. It's coming. And I'd like to end, if you would, Anthony, and maybe put you on the spot here, but I'd love to hear what is your vision on the future of the legal industry? You've tiptoed around this, and honestly, maybe planning a little bit of and concern for firms who haven't really been considering that. But I'd like to hear, what do you anticipate seeing with respect to technology over the next 5 years for the legal industry?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and I love the question. So just so you know, like Stellium, the company it's a company, but when it started, we were going to rebrand our law firm, and we were kind of going through this process. Good buddy of mine, one of the top brand guys out of Chicago, named David, Color Jars company. He's just a private brand, not really a legal company. And he came down to town. We were talking. I've known him for 10 years. And we were just noodling on this concept of the vision, of being a vision first company. I actually asked him who actually starts this way. It's kind of like whole Apple thing where it's start with why do we do it, then what do we do it, and then how, that kind of thing. Most people are we sell computers, and then how do we do it, and then why?
Yep.
They do it the other way. So we were doing that, and then we realized it was like, it's really not about my firm. It's about the idea of a better firm, like the idea of a better industry. And so that's what the Stellium was about, is that it's kind of this movement. And it's not about my firm or my companies. It's about how can we get more people that align with this. They see the change coming, and they need to be part of this adoption, because for us to catch this wave and for us to beat Wall Street, it's going to have to be in a line, like the rebel forces. We're going to have to get together, work together, and get some solidarity. So that's all a precursor to say, this is what I think is going to play out. I think that we will end up creating standards. And when I say standards, a platform, right? So everything besides going to court, to me, can be called a call center with technology, and then strain people on top of it. You're starting with, like some of the intake processing, you get into matter processing, and they're all just functions of a platform, or an operating system, if you will. Like the law firm operating system needs to be built. And CRMs are trying, but then you have a slew of vendors you use, that don't really integrate ad hoc. I think that we have, like I said, 3 to 5 years, and either we are going to start creating these standards, and there's some companies that are trying right now. We definitely are trying to lead that charge, and I support all those companies, because any standards really help people, and they help lawyers. Now, if we're talking about lawyers and what they could do, I would say it's a few things. It's that either if you have capabilities and skills or connections to be a part of this change, like get involved, state your voice, bring your expertise to why and how we should build that connectivity and that platform the way we want it to. Because we're going to need to unite, or else we'll get outpaced by some corporation just trying to take it, like you said, in the other space. But Aspen Dental in dentistry is another example. Private equity came in about 4 years ago, and they just went in hard. Now they own like 50% of the market share. It's a fun fact for lawyers is that, it's like a $400 billion market, and not a single, even the biggest firm in the U.S. doesn't own 1% market share in our industry. Wow. It's a fascinating fact. Well, I promise you Wall Street will own more than 1%. Mm-hmm. So I guess the way to get involved is to find the best in class vendors and make sure, and then start working collaboratively and less kind of secretly, away from each other. Find partners that know how to operate in a law firm or have done it for a long time. Although, and this in the digital world, like there's a lot of guys that do traditional stuff that say they've done it a long time, doesn't also mean that they're the right ones for the future. So, understand technology. If you don't, find the right partners. It's kind of the last tidbit, I guess, for validation of what I'm saying is I had my own tech team. I did it all myself for a long time. I had worked with hundreds of law firms' tech teams in the whole world. There was one tech team that I was like, you guys are by far like the A-Rods of everyone I've worked with, in-house tech teams, Mm-hmm. They ended up spinning off a company. We worked with them a little bit. I took my tech team and said, you know what? I like what you're doing so much that I want to merge my guys into your company. And their company now consults with other law firms to build data solutions like business intelligence dashboards. They connect QuickBooks to your CRM, to that kind of thing, to actually give you real business insights on your information. And they do it, and that's a category that isn't sold in legal. Mm-hmm. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry in every other company. So that's the kind of situation where it's like, find a partner that actually knows how to take you to the next level. If you can't do it yourself, if not, do everything you can to make sure lawyers win this battle instead of corporations. And if anyone has any interest, hit me up, and I'm happy to give them more information on who to go reach out to, or if you can help us and join our kind of cause.
Such a thought-provoking concept, and I think you speak on it so elegantly. For those who do want to explore that further with you, have a conversation, what's the best way for those to reach out to you? Yeah,
so my email, aj@stellium.com, STELLIUM.co. My law firm email is easier to remember, easier to spell at least, Anthony@yourattorney.com. So you can hit me up with either of them. Other than that, hit you up, and I'm sure you can get us connected, because
that's exactly right.
You seem to know all the guys. So
Anthony, thanks so much, man. Pleasure meeting you. Pleasure going through this with you.
Yeah, you too, man. I really appreciate it.
Lawsome by ConsultWebs with Tanner Jones. For show notes, links, and info, go to consultwebs.com/podcast. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Watch for the next Lawsome episode to discover more breakthrough insights to build a thriving law firm.